Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to this session on a 90 days study plan to reach the 99th percentile on GMAT Focus Edition. So, I'm very excited today. I'm Piyush from GMATWhiz. I'm doing this session on GMAT Club almost after 3-4 months. Like, this is probably the first time we are doing a GMAT Focus Edition specific study session. And again, we have done thorough research about how the GMAT works, what are the changes with the GMAT Focus Edition, and you're going to learn a lot of things that you need to keep in mind which you might not even have heard till this point while preparing for the GMAT Focus Edition. So I'm going to give you a very precise action plan, which will tell you every single week what you should be doing for the next 90 days to actually get to a 99th percentile. Okay, so a warm welcome to all of you. I'm sure a lot of you are very excited about this session today. Round one is gonna happen. Round one of admissions is gonna start in anywhere around 4-5 months from now, so it's the right time for you to start your GMAT prep. And if you are already into your GMAT prep, it's the right time to start identifying what are the loopholes, if there are any, and working on them. So, very warm welcome to all of you. And we are gonna do this in a three-episode series. So, today's session is gonna focus on the first part of the study plan, which is the major chunk, what we call as the learning phase. And as we move forward, I'll take up two more episodes of the same study plan session. The next episode will be focused on the improvement plan, and the last episode will be focused on the mock strategy or the timing strategy, which a lot of people love about GMAT quiz. Like we talk about timing strategies at length and how you can make minute changes in your on your exam day and even change your score significantly. Okay, so let's stay tuned to this and feel free to ask your questions throughout the session. Okay, so let's get started without any further ado. A quick intro about myself. I am doing the session after 3-4 months, so many of you might not even know me. So I'm Piyush Beriwala. I'm your co-host. I'm a strategy consultant and co-founder at GMATWhiz. I have 10 years of helping students, 10 years of experience helping students do MBA from tier 1 schools globally. You think of a B school in the world, whether it is ISB, NCR, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, you name any B school in the world, a tier 1 B school. I have sent multiple students over the last 10 years to those B schools. So what is the GMAT action plan going to look like? At a very broad level, I'm going to start with that so that you have a context about how things will work. And then we will go deep dive into each part. So at GMATWhiz, we always recommend that your GMAT action plan should be broadly divided into three stages. The first and foremost stage is your learning stage. And if this learning phase goes well, then everything else is set. You don't have to worry about the other two phases as much if you do this phase right. If you don't do this phase right, then the other two phases will become troublesome for you. But if you do this phase right, the other two stages will be a cakewalk. Now, this is the stage where you learn not just the concepts. Many people think, okay, learning phase just means concept learning. No, you learn concepts, you learn proper methods, and you practice almost like 1500 to 2000 questions in this phase. So this phase can take anywhere between 150 to 200 hours for you to complete. Again, this is assuming slightly above, below average to above average students. That's the category I'm talking about. Obviously, there are people who do this in 60 to 100 hours also. So I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people who are average, around average. So 120 to 150 to 200 hours of effort is what is needed. And by the end of this phase, you should be able to get to a 605 to 645 score range, depending on how good or bad you are. So in today's session, our focus is going to be the study plan that you need for this learning phase. We are going to deep dive into this. We're targeting a session of around 45 to 60 minutes. So in an hour, you will be able to understand how exactly you should go about the learning phase in every single detail, like all the detail that is required. You'll get that. In the next session, we will take up the second aspect, which is the fine tuning phase. So what we say is that, okay, after the learning phase, your major heavy lifting is done. So whatever weak areas you have, you work on the weak areas in this phase, and it can boost your score by another 40 points easily with 40 to 75 hours of effort. So basically 645 to 685 is what you can probably reach to if you do the second phase of fine tuning properly. And this is where your like error log comes into picture. This is where the importance of having a proper mentor comes into picture. This is where you have to do weak area analysis basically. So you all that comes into picture here, and this is going to be covered in episode 2 of the series, which is going to happen in just 2 weeks. So all the episodes will happen after a gap of 2 weeks. So today we have episode 1, 2 weeks later we'll have episode 2, and 2 weeks later we'll have episode 3. Okay, and the last session which we'll have episode 3 is gonna be on the mock phase. So mock phase is the third phase of a prep where you need to put in about 20 to 50 hours of effort, and that gives you the final boost of about 30 points or so. So basically, all three phases are very critical. So in the episode 3, we are going to touch upon what should be a mock strategy. We'll talk about the timing strategy for GMAT, how should you pace yourself, how the GMAT algorithm works. So basically, pacing, timing, and mock strategy is what you will need cover in episode 3. Okay, so let's get started with the learning phase. So now, for the learning phase, it's very, very critical. If you want to get the learning phase right, it is very critical that you know exactly how much you need to score. What should your target scores be? Now, I know we have titled this session as 90 days to 99 percentile, but many of you might be thinking, okay, I am not looking at a 99 percentile score. Again, 99 percentile is 760 on GMAT Classic, 715 on GMAT Focus. Again, those scores are generally required by people who are looking at just the top tier schools like Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford. There are a lot of other schools which are still top tier, like ISB, INSEAD, where I can probably get in with a 700 to 710. Like, again, I'm using the GMAT Classic version score as well, because that's like the benchmark set in all our minds till now. So 700, 710 is sufficient even for highly competitive pools. I'm talking about people from India, people from Asia, engineers. They can convert INSEAD and ISB at 700, 710, which is equivalent to a 645 to 655 as per GMAT conversion table. Coming back to the point, so what I was saying was that many of you might be thinking, okay, I don't need a 99 percentile, I just need a 645, 655 on the GMAT focus edition. So I think I should be able to get that fairly easily. Now, a lot of people are not understanding how GMAT focus edition scoring even works, and because of that, their preparation is not going right. In fact, I've seen a lot of people scoring around 645, 655 and feeling really happy because they have a 700 equivalent. So for those of you who don't know the conversion table of GMAT, as per GMAT, 645 in basically GMAT focus edition is equivalent to a 700 score on GMAT Classic. Okay, so that's how the scoring basically is given. So a lot of you might be thinking, okay, 645 is good enough score. Now let's take an example. I've taken two students example over here. Both these scores you can see in basically green and blue. There are two different students. Let's call them student 1 and student 2. Okay, so this guy is student 1. He scores a 655. This guy is student 2. He also scores a 655. Both of them have the same score, but there's a difference in their sectional scores. Like quant, DI, and verbal scores are slightly different. Now, can any one of you tell me who is a more desirable candidate to a ISB or an INSEAD, basically? Who will probably get through ISB and INSEAD in everything else falling into place? Obviously, I'm assuming that is there, obviously, but everything else falling into place, who will get into ISB and INSEAD and who will not? Can anyone tell me, and why? Because again, this is a very important point I'm bringing to the picture, because this point has not been talked about by a lot of experts till now, and this, if ignored, will become a very, very big problem if you apply to B schools. You might take the GMAT focus edition, get a good enough score, and later on realize that you're still getting rejected because you did not plan the GMAT focus right. So any difference between student 1 and student 2, and who you think B school will accept, and why? Once again, in case any one of you wants to ask anything to me, or basically which you can't share here, obviously there are people who don't want to share on a public platform or social media platform, you can always schedule a call on my calendar using this link. I'm happy to discuss with you guys. So Jitendra says ideally S1. Okay, Jitendra, the only person who has responded. What about others? Still waiting, guys? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Let's see how what do you think about it. Again, analysis is what is important, discussion is what is important. If we get the analysis right, we might be wrong initially, but at least things will stay in our mind. And trust me, guys, when you participate in discussions, you will actually learn a lot more than just sitting idle and hearing the discussion. Okay, so feel free to share the responses. So Jitendra says ideally S1 should be the one selected. Is it good having a giving GMAT without work experience? Again, depends, Vikrant, on your profile. If you're looking at early entry options, yes. Again, that's not the focus of the session right now, so I'm not going to go deeper into that. But yeah, we can take up this question towards the end of the session, definitely. S2 is Vivian says. Okay, why Vivian S2? Why Jitendra? Why do you feel S1? Now again, I would have waited for your answers, but again, in the interest of time, we'll have to move forward. Now, there's a big difference between these two people, and please understand that. Earlier on the GMAT Classic, the aspect which I'm going to talk about did not matter as much. And this aspect is basically about sectional cutoffs. And a lot of B schools have not even talked about this till now because GMAT Focus Edition is very new. But a lot of you will actually see this happening when the application journey starts this year. And this will be a very, very big blow to a lot of people who think they have the right score. Now, let me detail this out. So, what I'm showing right now is these two students, and I'm just comparing one part of their score, which is their verbal percentiles versus their actual scores. Now, what has happened on GMAT Focus Edition? If you look at these two students, for example, over here, you might find that their verbal scores are very similar, right? 76 and 80, right? There's hardly any difference. 4 points difference on a scale of 90, that's nothing. But that's not the true picture. If you look at the true picture, what you will realize is that a verbal 76 is just a 25 percentile. So this student has only scored a 25 percentile on verbal. Okay, on the other hand, this guy has scored a 60th percentile in verbal. Are you getting my point? So this is what is happening with the GMAT Focus Edition scoring. If you can get to the same score of 655, which is on an equivalent scale. If you convert that, that is equivalent to 710, which is good enough for any European B school, any Indian B school. Whether you look at IIMs, ISB, it's very good score for all these schools if you have a decent profile. Now, even in that case, you see people with very different verbal scores, and very highly likely scenario is that this guy, student one, is gonna get rejected by the B school because their verbal score is too less. When you say 25 percentile, it's like in 100 people, you are only better than 25 of them. 75 of them have a better verbal score than yours. That's a very poor score. Now, why is this happening? This is happening majorly because there are three sections, right? Quant, DI, and verbal. So a lot of people are pulling up their weight in quant and DI. And if you are an Asian, if you are an Indian student, again, I don't want to label like a particular country people in certain brackets, but generally Indians and Asians generally do better in quant, and or not naturally they are good at quant. That means they are good at DI also in many cases, in most cases rather. So there's a tendency that you can actually get a very high quant and DI score, and with a very low verbal score, you can still get a 700 pool. In fact, I can show you with data that there is a possibility of a person getting to a 715, which is the 99th percentile on GMAT Focus, even with 30-40 percentile in verbal. And trust me, guys, that's not a profile that a B school will want. So if you are not focusing on verbal enough, if you're not focusing on verbal, if you're just thinking that, okay, you know what, quant, DI, verbal, three areas are there, I need to give 33% attention to each, you are wrong, my friend. If verbal is not your strength, you are wrong. You need to give much more focus to verbal. About 50 to 60% of your effort should go to verbal if verbal is not your strength. It is even true today. Now, why all this is coming into picture altogether, right? Like, why am I thinking about all this so much right now? Again, GMAT was done in a similar way from so long. Why were B schools not thinking about the verbal scores? You have to understand that difference in scoring that has happened. So if you look at the GMAT Classic, basically, if you look at the GMAT Classic version, which is the old version, which is phased out now, if you were scoring a 700 on GMAT, your minimum verbal score should have been a 34, because even if you achieve a highest score in quant, which is 51, which is very rare, you still have to get a minimum of 34. And minimum of 34 means the verbal percentile against 34, corresponding to 34, was 71. So if anyone is scoring a 700, a B school knew that this guy is at least has a 70th percentile in verbal. So they did not have to worry about verbal scores individually. And that's why you would see most of the B schools just talking about their average GMAT score of the incoming batch. They don't generally mention a lot around the verbal and the quant individual breakdowns, because 700 basically means you have a 71 percentile on verbal. But we just saw the same scenario, that on GMAT Focus, the same score, 700 is equivalent to 655. Actually, 710 is equivalent to 655. But a similar score, in fact, you can achieve a better score with a verbal percentile of just 25. Just 25. Imagine that, guys. Think about it. And because of this, there is going to be a big problem which is going to happen. A lot of B schools are going to present on their website something called a sectional cutoff. They might do it before round one, they might do it after round one, they might do it after round two. You don't know when they will mention this explicitly on their websites, but it's gonna happen. So it's very, very critical that you keep a bare minimum target of a certain percentile in verbal, and I would recommend targeting at least, just to be safe, a verbal 80, because that's at least a 60th percentile score. So if you get a verbal 80, you should be able to clear the sectional cutoffs for most of the schools. Again, that's the bare minimum that you should need to keep in mind. Now, when I said that a lot of these schools will do it, I've just showing you data from just two of the very prominent European schools. You look at NCR. Read this is snippet from their website itself. For GMAT Focus Edition, NCR recommends a minimum of 68th percentile on verbal component, which is verbal 80. Okay, you see HEC, they are going to the extent of saying that they need a 635, is a 690 on GMAT Focus Edition, but they encourage students to have on GMAT Focus, they encourage students to have a equivalent performance of 83 percentile under each format. Now I am assuming under each format, by format they mean under each section. So basically in verbal, they expect you to have a 83 percentile score, which is close to 83 only in V83 or V84 is what I remember. Let me check here. Yes, so 83 percentile is equal, 86 percentile is equivalent to 83. So yeah, you need to have a verbal 83 minimum for HEC Paris. And these are just two B schools which I have mentioned who have already given the sectional cutoff criteria on the websites. Earlier, sectional cutoffs were not there, or even if they're there, it was just for quant section that they were looking at. A quant 48 or above is what they wanted. But now verbal sectional cutoffs are also gonna come. And that is something which is gonna hurt a lot of people. I've already spoken to at least 10 people who have gotten GMAT Focus Edition out of the way. They have scored 655 plus in GMAT Focus Edition, which is definitely a good score for any of the top B schools in Europe or India, even Singapore for that matter. And their verbal percentile is below the 50th percentile. And they were not even aware that the sectional cutoff criteria could be there. And they were just thinking about writing their applications with this score. You trust me, guys, you might get rejected with this. There's a very high possibility. So what I'm recommending is that when you're setting your target scores in your mind, when you're creating a study plan, it's very important that you set your target score right. If you set your target score wrong, you will end up missing the applications, you'll end up, sorry, missing the admission just because the sectional cutoffs were not meeting. Okay, and I've given you some circumstances. I don't want to go into complicated math. I can show you even people with 99th percentile can end up with very, very low verbal scores. So let's understand how to set the target scores. Now, there are two category of people generally which I see. One category is people who are very good in one section. Like out of the three, they are very good in one section. If that is the case, you need to maximize your score in that section. And I'll give you an idea approximately what kind of maximum score should you aim for. Other kind of people are those who are equally good in all sections, as in they're equally good in quant, verbal, data insight. So they are almost at a similar level in all three. So they have to balance their scores. That's how you need to go about doing that. Now let's take a target score in mind to actually understand what kind of individual sectional scores you should target. So let's say if you're targeting a 715 in GMAT Focus Edition, which is basically 99th percentile and equivalent to 760 in GMAT Classic, which is good enough for any top B school. In that case, if you belong in the first category, you are very good in one section, and that section happens to be quant or DI. Again, I'm treating quant and DI at similar level because they're very, very similar areas. Like they're testing you on similar skill sets, so they're very similar areas in that regard. So if that is the case, then your target score should ideally be a quant 90, data insights 85, and verbal 83. Obviously, if you can do better in verbal, slightly better in verbal, it's great. But again, this should be a score which you should aim for. It should get you through, because if quant and DI is your focus, like it's a strength, you're very good in it, then you should try and maximize your score here. And is quant 90 possible? Definitely possible. If you think that is you're not a quant whiz, you cannot probably get to the best score in quant, you can reduce this by 1 point, increase verbal by another. So that's up to you. But yeah, quant 90 is what you should aim for, in my opinion. If you are someone who is a native speaker of the English language, you are very good in verbal, you have been very good at linguistics, you should target a high score in verbal, close to 88, 89 you can target, and your quant score should be 86 and verbal DI score should be 83. I'm assuming if you are weak in DI and quant, you should you need to get still a minimum of 83 and 86, 86 and 83 to kind of get to that 715 category. On the other hand, if you're equally good in all three areas, then your target score should be 88 in quant, 84 in verbal, DI, and 85 in verbal. I'm still not saying 85, 85, 85 in all three or similar score in all three, because again, we should not look at the individual scores. We should look at the percentiles, because percentiles tell us how easy or complex it is to kind of get to a target score. So if you are equally good on all three, quant 88 is almost equivalent to a DI 84. It's almost as difficult as a DI 84, and that is almost as difficult as a verbal 85. Almost all of them are in the 95th, 96th percentile or 98th percentile range, in that range itself. So that's how you need to set a target score. Now, why setting a target score is important? Because if you set the right target scores and you take the mock test to begin with, if you take a mock test to begin with, you can understand what's your current skill level. So for example, let's say your target scores are 89, DI 85, and verbal 84. Let's say these are your target scores, and right now after a mock test you see this is 85, this is let's say 80, and verbal is let's say at 70 level. Okay, and obviously you need to convert these to percentiles also, but just for the sake of easier understanding, you see a huge gap in verbal. That means you need to give a lot of impetus, maybe 60 to 70% of your effort should go on verbal. You need to keep that in mind. So that's why it's important to have a target score in mind as well. It's not just enough to have a mock score, because many people just take a mock test just to see where they stand, but they don't keep a target in their mind. So target scores are as important as the mock scores are. And in case you want to understand what your target score should be or how GMATWhiz can help you plan your studies, feel free to connect with me on this link. Happy to discuss with you 101. But yeah, the idea is that getting the targets set for quant and verbal and DI is very, very important. Now, in order to create a study plan, what else do you need? You also need to understand the sequence of studying. So I always recommend that, since DI basically is nothing but quantitative and logical reasoning skills combined, basically, so it's quantitative plus logical reasoning skills combined with a little bit of reading, basically. So you should be able to read things well. So a little bit of verbal reasoning is there, most of it is quant reasoning. Again, logical reasoning is very similar to quant reasoning. So I would say DI is 80% quant and 20% verbal in that sense. So if you really want to prepare well for DI, what is important is that you complete your quant and verbal prep first and then venture into DI. And DI has two parts, okay? Integrated reasoning and data sufficiency. In my opinion, you should be doing data sufficiency questions along with quant, because they are typically quant questions only. So you should be doing data sufficiency questions along with quant. So work on quant and data sufficiency and verbal together, and then only you move to DI. And usually, if you are preparing in the right way, then about 20% of effort would be required for DI, and 80% of effort would be required on these two areas. Now, if you are very good in quant, you might be able to do this with 30% effort, and 50% effort goes over here. If you are exceptionally good in quant, this might just require 20%, and this might need just 60%. If you are equally good in both, you might do 40%, 40% as well. Okay, so that depends on you, like how do you divide this 80%. But the idea is that total time on a content verbal should be 80%, and 20% of your prep time should go to data insights. Okay, is that thought clear to all of you? Quick yes no will help overall. So if you guys agree, there is any doubt, feel free to ask me. If you agree, just say a yes. If you understood this, just say a yes. That will really, really help. Okay, so that should be the sequence of studying. Now, with that sequence of studying, let's break down this action plan that we talked about and try to create a 3-month action plan out of it. Okay, so basically, what I'm doing is I'm just taking certain assumptions over here. So we'll take out like make certain assumptions, because obviously for every student the study plan should be different. At GMAT, especially where we are using artificial intelligence to personalize the learning for every student, we don't believe in templatized study plans. Okay, but for the sake of this session, for the interest of the session, I'm going to give you a general study plan of 3 months, how it should look like with certain assumptions in place. Okay, so if you're someone who is basically doing about 20 hours of prep a week, you are a above average student. I'm not saying exceptionally good student, you are an above average student. You are generally in the top 10 20 percentile of your class, basically. So you are an above average student and you are equally good in all the sections. You are equally good in quant, verbal, and DI. Then this is how you should distribute your 3 months. So week 1 to week 9, almost the first half of week 9 should be your learning phase. So this is basically, if you remember, the main phase of your learning phase, where you are prepping and getting DI, quant, verbal out of the way, all three areas. Then from week 9 to week 12, like half of week 9 to half of week 12, should be your fine tuning phase. So in fine tuning phase, you'll be able to get to a score of 645 to 685, and last 2 weeks should be your basically mock stage. Okay, now obviously you see a lot of blanks here. So each line, each bar that you see is basically 10 hours of effort. So this is 10 hours of effort. Each one of these is 10 hours of effort. Okay, so you can count the number of bars if you want to. It's approximately a 3 week plan, keeping 20 hours a week. Now, how do you fill these line items? So this is week 1, guys. This is week 2. This is week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7, 8, 9, and so on. So this is how you need to start. You need to kind of have a timetable in place, but you need to fill this 9 items. Okay, what should come here? What should I study in week 1, first 10 hours? What should I study in week 1, next 10 hours? So all of that is very critical, and that's what we are going to focus on next. Okay, so we're going to build a study plan together. Now I could have simply given you the study plan, right? Could have shown you the study plan on the screen, and you might have just downloaded it or taken a snapshot of it. But the idea is not just to serve things on your plate, because if I just serve things on your plate, you don't understand why things work in a certain way. And at GMAT especially, we want students to be independent. We want students to actually understand things logically, not just memorize stuff. Okay, so I'll explain and help you understand how you should be filling each of these, and that way you will be able to not just understand the study plan, you will be able to complete the study as per the plan, and you will also be able to make certain changes if needed. Okay, so let's get into that. So for that, for in order to fill the things, we need to also understand what should be the sequence of studying within individual areas be. So we understood that quant and verbal should be done before data insights, but within verbal, what should you be doing first? So for in verbal, there are three skills that are tested. If you look at broad level, so they want you to understand complex sentences well, like that's what we call as comprehension skill. The second skill which is tested is analytical reasoning. You should be able to connect multiple sentences together and understand what can be inferred, what cannot be inferred, what are the logical flaws in the argument that are given. And the third skill which is tested is you should be able to even get the main idea out of the entire picture which is given to you. So if you map the skills tested to the different areas in verbal, what you will realize is that critical reasoning tests you on the first two skills, and reading comprehension tests you on all three skills. Now, since reading comprehension tests you on all three skills and critical reasoning tests you just on the first two, it always makes sense to start with critical reasoning and then move on to reading comprehension. Don't do the other way around. Don't start with RC and then go to CR. Start with critical reasoning and then go to RC. That is better. In fact, at GMATWhiz, we even recommend that to build your comprehension skills, it is important for you to start with smaller sentences. Again, earlier in GMAT, there was something called sentence correction where grammar was tested. But what we recommend is that other than grammar, there was one more aspect of sentence correction, which was about understanding the meaning of complex sentences. And that is something which you should learn first, and then only you should move to CR. So I mentioned this as an optional activity, which is mastering the meaning of complex sentences. So what we call as like we have an approach basically to help you understand complex sentences better by reading by breaking sentences down into small things. This is non-grammatical aspect of sentence that you need to focus on. What this will do, this will help you read complex sentences better. This will also help you read faster in the long run basically. So this is a very good way of starting. Now we recommend this as an optional module. This is a part of the GMATWhiz curriculum. Before CR, we recommend you to start with this, and then you should move on to CR and RC one at a time. And about individually, CR requires about 30 to 40 hours of effort, and RC requires another 30 to 40 hours of effort, depending on how good or bad you are, approximately. Okay, now quant, how should you be doing quant? So there are a lot of topics tested in quant. Like it's not as simple as verbal that okay, CR and RC, two areas are tested. I know there are multiple topics there as well, but in quant there are a lot of concepts also that are tested. So all the test topics are on your screen. Now a lot of people make a mistake that they will try to classify them into three buckets, like algebra, arithmetic, or word problems and number properties, and they will try to do all algebra topics first and number properties topics later. But that is not how quant works, because there are a lot of interdependencies that exist in quant. Let's say for example, if you are doing prime numbers, you will be tested on the concept of even odd numbers within prime numbers. Similarly, in prime numbers, you will also be tested on the concept of exponents. You will also be tested on the concept of basics of number properties and all of that. So there is a lot of interdependency that exists in quant specifically, and what I have given you on the screen is the right order in which you should go through every topic, because this takes care of the interdependencies. Okay, so we broadly break this down into three buckets. The first bucket is quant basics, 1 to 12. These are basic areas of quant, not very complex but very critical still, and you need to go through them first in this order that you see. The second set of topics from 13 to 23, I have not created a bracket around them, but 13 to 23 is basically what we call as intermediate topics. Okay, these are intermediate topics, and most of your time will go towards these topics because these are slightly more complex and more tested if you are targeting a higher score. And the last four topics that you see are advanced topics in quant. Okay, so you should be doing them towards the end. Okay, so broadly this is the structure in which you should go about, and you can see these topics are color coded for number properties, algebra, and word problems. So if you were thinking of doing all number properties topics first, understand that you are going through a wrong sequence in that case. So the sequence should be in this way. Now let's try to map this sequence onto the same study plan that we thought of. Okay, so again, my assumptions, remember, I'm saying that you are having 20 hours every week, which basically means 2 hours every weekday, on every weekday, and 5 hours on the weekend, or maybe 1.5 hours on the weekdays, and let's say 6 7 hours on the weekends individually. Every, like, I'm assuming Saturday Sunday are free for you. So with that assumption in place, what we need to understand is we should be starting with critical reasoning in verbal and quant basics, obviously. So in quant basics you have multiple topics. If you remember, I have given you on the screen. Again, I did not want to put it on the slide, otherwise it will be too crazy, but these quant basic topics you need to do most likely in the first week. You should be able to wrap up topic from 1 to 5 comfortably. You should be able to complete topics 1 to 5 comfortably, and the rest should be targeted in the next week, and so on. Okay, so basically first week on verbal front, this is the verbal side of things. So on the verbal front, you need to learn how to break down complex sentences, and you need to do critical reasoning inference topic, and quant basics, the part I just said. In week 2, you should be doing critical reasoning assumption and the strengthened topic, and you should be completing the remaining part of quant basics in the week 2. In week 3, you should be doing CR weekend and evaluate along with quant intermediate. In the same way, week 4, you should complete all CR topics and quant intermediate half, like almost 60 70% through. Fifth week, you are doing RC reading strategies, learn how to read RCs, and complete quant intermediate. Sixth week, you do inference and main idea from RC and do quant advanced. And seventh week, you do the other topics in RC which are related to application, structure, function, those type of question types, and complete quant advanced. So quant intermediate is going to consume 3 weeks of your time approximately. So you can see that over here. 3 weeks quant intermediate, 2 weeks quant basics, and 2 weeks on quant advanced. Now you might think, okay, in quant advanced we only had a few topics, so why am I asking to give 2 weeks? Because these topics are more complex, generally takes more time to get used to, understand, and even practice. So this is the best way to kind of look at your first 7 weeks. Now the next 2 weeks, week 8 and week 9, should be focused on data insights. And trust me guys, if you, and again, remember, they DS part, the data sufficiency part of data insights you're already doing with quant. So in DI, you're just focusing on the integrated reasoning part. In week 8, focus on two-part analysis, table analysis, and graphical representation. And week 9, first part, half of the week, give to multi-source reasoning, which is a very complex type of question within integrated reasoning. And from week 9 itself, you can start the fine tuning also and focus on fine tuning of verbal and quant weak areas. Then go to in the week 10 and week 11, half of the time or 70% of the time you can give to weak areas, and the remaining time you can do overall practice and sectional tests. And from week 12 onwards, you can start with the mocks. Okay, so if you want to take a snapshot of the screen of the study plan, you guys can do that right here, right now. I'll just erase this ink. So all the lines that you see are individual weeks. So in 13 weeks, which is exactly 3 months, you should be able to complete wrap up a prep with 20 hours every single week. Okay, so this is probably the best way I can picturize a study plan, but again, this is a templatized study plan with certain assumptions that you are doing 20 hours weekly, you are equally good in all three areas. If you are obviously more like if you're good in quant compared to verbal, you should be taking out certain slices from quant. You can take out probably one slice out of quant and push it towards verbal. Okay, may you might need to do more practice of verbal. On the other hand, if you are, let's say, weaker in quant, stronger in verbal, you might be pushing out one slice to this part. Like we might be doing more of quant than verbal. Totally depends on who you are. It also matters how much time you are giving. Are you giving 20 hours? Are you giving 25 hours? Are you giving 16 hours? You have to adjust based on that. But the most important thing in the first phase or your learning phase is to have a weekly action plan. If you don't have a weekly action plan, you will fall into a mess. Okay, trust me, you will not be able to complete your studies. People who complete their studies in record time are the ones who plan their studies right. So have a weekly action plan in place. Something like this or even more comprehensive action plans can be created, and if you want, GMATWhiz team can help you out with that. We create personalized action plans along with the content, obviously, for GMAT preparation. We are a GMAT test prep provider. You can get that personalized action plan from GMATWhiz. I'll just show you a small snippet of the same. So when you create an account on GMATWhiz, it asks you what your target score is. You can just mention your target score, that okay, I'm aiming for this kind of a particular score, let's say 720, whatever you want to mention the target score in mind, and then mention what your current scores are. If you don't have a current score, just say I don't have a current score. And then you can say how many hours you are studying every week. You can say 11 to 20 hours, 21 to 30, whatever range you feel, and there's a recommendation that you are also giving. Basically any number of hours you can select, and you can also say whether I want to start with quant first or verbal first, or I want to do both of them. It's up to you basically. And then it will create an action plan for you, which will actually contain a week wise target for you. So you can see in the current week what you need to do is already given to you. Now if you're a free trial user, you will only have access to 1 week's or 2 weeks plan at best, which is a very short limited time plan. So as you can see on the next screen, it shows on the calendar what you need to do in the current week. Basically certain small action items are given, but on the right side you should be also able to get timelines broadly of upcoming milestones. If you take the complete package, you will be able to complete your entire course by 15th of June, approximately in the week of 15th of June, where you will do the data insights portion. So approximate study plan is milestones are also given to you. You can go to the course, you can access any activity that you want. Obviously free trial is the only one you have access to, the other areas are limited, but you can see each part is actually coming with a particular timestamp. So if you can see over here, it clearly, let me just pause this once. So you can see that you will be completing advanced RC on 11th of June. So you can see the target timelines for everything. In fact, you have an option to change your number of hours every week. You can mention how many hours you want to study. If you study less hours, more hours, the plan gets adjusted according to that. So you can now see the study plan. Let's say for example I go to data insights, it's now finishing around 18th of August instead of June. Okay, similarly you have an option to increase the number of hours you want to give to quant or verbal. You can give more hours to verbal, less hours to quant, depending on where you're strong or weak. So you can do 30% quant, 70% verbal. Things like that can be done. So all of this is accessible if you want, basically on the GMATWhiz platform, and you can use GMATWhiz to kind of get a more personalized study plan. But the idea is that you need to have an action plan in place. Okay, now once you have an action plan in place, it is very important that you start studying. And again, a lot of people do not do the studies right. In fact, a lot of people get a few basic things wrong, because of which even if they have an action plan, they fail to get the best out of it. Okay, so I'm going to share a few tips which will actually help you to make sure that you're not ending up making these mistakes. And these pointers are very very critical, especially for working professionals. So if you're very working professional, the first step and foremost step is to get started. Okay, so let's understand what are the important things. Now any one of you who wants to try GMATWhiz a study plan for free, you have this option. You can have this link in the chat. You can always go ahead and try it out. Some of the content is available in the free trial. For more content, you can always subscribe to our paid services. Okay, so to get started, first and foremost, fix a slot. If you're a working professional, it's very important to fix a slot. A lot of people don't do that. They just say, okay, every day I'm going to study 1.5 hours or 2 hours. It is very critical that you fix a time slot that I'm going to study from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and keep that sacrosanct. Try to do this in the morning, because in the evening you never know when your work will end, and probably it will not be a consistent effort after that. So trust me, it's very critical to do it in the morning. preferably. Unless you are a night owl, you're a night person, that's a different story. You need to be consistent and you need to get buy-ins. This is very critical, guys. If you are a working professional, get buy-ins from your manager, your family, your girlfriend, whosoever matters to you. Again, I'm not sure whether you can openly tell your managers about your GMAT plans, but there are other ways around things. You can always tell them other reasons why you are not available in a certain slot. Get buy-ins that this slot is for my personal time. I should not be disturbed around this time, come what may. So that is how you need to kind of plan things out. I know it's idealistic, but you have to push yourself to get things right. The most important thing is consistency. Now, how do you start? Now, there are two categories of people who take time to form a new habit, people who are you find it relatively easy to form a new habit. If you are someone who takes time to form a new habit, or you are someone who is out of touch with studies for a long time, you probably fall in category one. For people who fall in category one, they should start their GMAT prep in a slightly different way. For example, in your case, you should start with your strongest section in 2 weeks. So if you remember, I gave you an action plan which said you have to do quant and verbal both every single week. Now that's a general action plan. For anyone who finds it difficult to form a new habit, for the first 2 weeks, just do their strongest section. Just do the strongest section for 2 weeks. Why? Because when you do your strongest section, you tend to get a better score in that. You get motivated, and that pushes you to study for longer. Okay, start with the stronger section and try to give about 75 to 85% of your available time on GMAT from for the first 2 weeks. Just for the first 2 weeks, give only 75 to 80% of your total time available. Rest of the time, keep it free, because you don't want to feel burnt out from day one. And if you're studying for more than 20 hours every week, then you can do both quant and verbal from 2+ weeks. Basically, after 2+ weeks, you can do quant and verbal both. On the other hand, if you are in the second category who find it fairly easy to form a new habit, you can start with your weakest section, and you can start with giving 100% of your time from day one itself. Okay, so keep these things in mind. Now, these are some basic good to have things, right? Fixing a slot, getting buy-ins, understanding how to start, how much effort to put. But how should you learn each topic? That's also very critical. You need to understand how should you go about every topic. So we talked about critical reasoning, RC, and within CR, assumptions, and then we can, within quant, we saw prime numbers, divisibility. A lot of other topics are there also. So how should you learn each topic? Now, in the learning phase, it's not just about basic concept building. You have to also practice questions. You also have to learn proper methods. And trust me, guys, people do not focus on all three things. They just focus on one or two of them, and that's when they falter. Their time for prep goes up. So what are these three stages I'm talking about? The first and foremost stage is the concept learning stage. Now, this is what many people do, right? And there are very few people, about 10% of them, who don't even do this, who just open the OG and start solving questions, or just try to learn the concept from the OG. Trust me, OG is a very good book for solving questions, but it is not the first step that you should be doing. It's not a great book to learn concepts. Step one is to learn the concepts. OG should be used in step three, basically. Okay, that I'll come to. So first, learn concepts properly. Now, conceptual learning is something where you learn everything in a logical way. Don't memorize concepts. I've just shown a slide on certain concepts, but idea is that you understand the concepts from a logical standpoint, so that if there is a twist in the question, you're able to adjust to that twist. Okay, so for example, in divisibility, there are multiple rules you might have to learn. Step two is the most critical step and the most ignored step. I would say less than 5% people do step two correctly in the initial days, and those are the people who get to the target score in the fastest possible time. Okay, we have had students who have scored 770, which is like 99.5 percentile on GMAT Classic in first 2 months itself, and these are people who are actually getting this approach, the methodology right from day one. So if you really want to do that, make sure that you follow this step, basically. Okay, so very very critical that you learn all the variations in which a topic can ever be tested, and you learn methods for every topic as well. So multiple variations could exist, multiple ways could exist of testing a topic. And the good thing with GMAT is GMAT happens the year round, right? It happens the entire year. You can take the GMAT on any given day. Now, because of that, GMAT has to ensure that they standardize their type of questions, because obviously if you change the type of questions a lot, you will not be able to compare two people on the same benchmark, right? You want to compare people on the same benchmark, you need to keep the question types similar. So there are specific sets of specific variations that GMAT tests you on. And if you are aware of all these variations, you learn all these variations, you can actually tackle the GMAT. So, for example, there are questions in divisibility which test you on this concept of number, divisor, and quotient. So, these questions are read like that: a number n, when divided by a divisor, let's say 6, leaves a remainder of 5. What is the remainder when this number is divided by 12? Okay, so these are the kind of questions that you get. Now there could be multiple variations in this question. So look at d1 d2 as the divisors and r as the remainder is what you have to find out basically. But it's possible that d2 is a factor of d1. For example, 12 number divided by 12 gives a remainder of 5. What is the remainder when it is divided by 6? Another variation is d2 is still a factor of d1, but the remainder which is there is bigger than d2. Another variation is d2 is a multiple of d1. 6 when number when divided by 6 gives a remainder of 5. What is the remainder when it is divided by 12? Another variation is that d2 and d1 have nothing in common altogether. So there are multiple variations possible in every type of topic. Now what we have done from our side at GMATWhiz is that we have come up with an idea of a concept booster or a booster, where what we have done is we have done extensive research on every single topic, every single question that has been tested on GMAT ever, or from every topic. We have done extensive research on that, and we have classified all the question types or variations for every topic into different buckets. So let's say, for example, prime numbers. There were 200 official questions on prime numbers. We classified all these questions into, let's say, 10 or 11 buckets, where we call all of them as individual variations, and we try to teach you individual type of variation so that you know how to tackle each variation. And the best part is we don't teach you 10 different methods for 10 different variations. We try to teach you one or maximum two methods which can tackle all type of variations. In most cases it is one single method which can tackle all type of variations, so you don't have to mug up methods that, okay, I see this type of question, I apply that method. No, we try to teach a single method which works across all variations basically. And we have created this idea of a concept booster or a booster file which comes as a part of the GMATWhiz course after you learn the concepts of any topic. So let's say you're done with divisibility concepts right now. You will see a booster or multiple boosters on divisibility where you will get to see one question at a time, only one question, just one of the variations. Okay, and right after you solve the question, you will get to see the solution which tells you how you should have approached this question in a systematic way. That, okay, first I should have done this, then I should have done this, then I should have done this. A proper methodical approach is given to you, shown to you, and then you are supposed to identify the gaps in your approach. That, okay, this is the way I should have solved the question, this is the way actually ended up solving it, so what are the changes that I need to make? And once you identify those changes, you can actually apply them on the next question basically. So what happens is that you do question number one, then you look at solution one, then you do question number two. So whatever learning you have generated from solution one, you apply that on question two. Then you see solution two, then you go to question number 3, then you move to solution 3, then you go to question number 4, solution 4, and this way you complete the booster. And each and every question, as I said, is handpicked, covers a different variation, and make sure that all the topics, all the variations are covered from easiest to the most difficult. Okay, so you can utilize this concept boosters really well. If you want to, this way you will be able to get the maximum out from every topic, and you will not face a scenario where you will come across a new type of question on the day of the test and you will feel, okay, I was not prepared for this. That will never happen to you. Now if you want to understand more about this, feel free to reach out to me or our team on this, support at the rate of gmatwiz.com, and just schedule a call on our calendar. Happy to help you understand how we can convert your GMAT goes into reality. And we have, by the way, at GMATWhiz, we have had the highest score improvement in the entire industry. Our students on an average improve their scores by 100 plus points. Okay, that's a very, very big number to achieve. Most people are able to see the improvement because of this in-depth understanding that we have created. So you'll be able to see this concept boosters in every topic. So there are video lessons which help you learn the concepts. Again, multiple video lessons could be there, multiple concept boosters could be there. So second step is the method part, and the final step is the practice part. Again, there could be multiple practice quizzes also overall. Now why is this method part so important? Why am I talking about this method so much over here? Because when you want to score anything around 685 plus, 685 plus is basically, in GMAT classic lingo, it is 730 or more, which is generally the 730 is the average score of Stanford, GSB or Harvard, around that number. So if you really want to score this much on easy and medium questions, you need to get 90 to 100% accuracy, but you also need to get somewhere around 60 to 70% accuracy on hard questions, because GMAT is an adaptive test. Just the accuracy doesn't matter. You need to also get the hardest questions right. Now, in order to get the hardest questions right, you need to get the right methods also. You cannot use shortcuts on hard questions. Shortcuts will only work on easy and medium questions. So don't fall for shortcuts. Learn methods which work on hard questions also. So for CR, learn pre-thinking. For RC, learn involved and evolved reading. For data sufficiency, learn drawing inference method. For problem solving, there's a three-step approach that we teach in GMATWhiz. For IR, reading data efficiently, calculating efficiently is very, very critical. So it's important that you look at the right methods. And the most important part when you learn the method is also to make sure that you're validating the method. So if you remember, I recommended that after solving every question, you should look at the solution and see how the approach should have been. So this is a CR question. Basically, let's say you solved, okay, this is the argument, these are the options you pick up. Most people, when they look at the solution, they look at the explanation of each option only. They only look at option analysis and try to see why they got the question wrong. Instead of looking at option analysis, try to focus on step one, which is stimulus analysis. Basically, try to see how you should have read the argument. Okay, first line, this is the analysis that I should have done for the first line. Second line, this is the analysis that I should have done for the second line. Third line, this is the analysis that I should have done for the third line. Try to map your line of reasoning, your methodology, starting from step one. If you do that for every single question, if you do that for every single question, trust me, no one can stop you from getting a high score on GMAT, because you are making sure that you know concepts as well as methods. Both of them are taken care of by you. Okay, that's the best thing you can do. And that's when, once you are done with these two steps, you should take practice quizzes to identify your gaps. If you are scoring well, well and good. If you are not scoring well, you have to identify the gaps and work on the weak areas right away. Take up more questions on the weak areas. Don't let the issues pile up. Don't be in a situation where you're ending up moving to advanced topics without working on the weaker topics, basically. Okay, so all of that is very, very critical. So GMAT action plan, first phase, the learning phase, you can use the GMAT study plan, you can use the official guide along with it, and GMAT club as well, to complete your first phase properly. Okay, so this is episode 1. We are talking about the first phase, the learning phase. Stay tuned with me for episode 2 and episode 3, where we will take up the other two stages of the prep as well. Okay, guys. So episode 2 is gonna go live in another couple of weeks. So be here. You will get the notification on GMAT Club, and you will also get to see the link in the description in very soon, once the session is scheduled on the calendar as well. Okay. So again, the idea is, in generally in the fine tuning stage, you need to work with a mentor. Fine tuning stage is a difficult stage to manage, because again, it is very personalized, depends on what like weak areas you have. So error logs, weak area identification, all that becomes very, very critical, and I'm going to talk about that in my next session for sure, in depth. Okay, so you have the final screen in front of you, guys, like the 3-month action plan. Go about this in this way. I've shown it on your screen. Again, this is a slightly generalized action plan that you see, because obviously I have to assume certain things to show a plan which works for everyone. But yes, you can create a more personalized plan using the GMATWhiz. You have this link, you can use that. You can write to us on support@gmatwiz.com, or even contact me directly. I'm happy to help you understand how you should change your action plan, how GMATWhiz can help you, and who knows, we can be interviewing you next time around, talking about your GMAT success story. So that's about it from my side, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm more than happy to take it up. I still have 5 minutes before it reaches 1 hour. My target is to complete this within an hour. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on this, on the details here. My professional email ID is also on the screen. My WhatsApp number is also on the screen. You can reach out to me on that. You can reach out to me on this call as well, call link that I shared. Okay, so guys, I hope I was able to give you a very good idea about how to start with your study plan, how to create the right action plan, and all of that. and I hope this really helps you in getting to the maximum score possible. And do remember, don't ignore verbal. Don't give it 33% weightage. It is going to be much more critical, especially if you are weak in verbal, because the sectional cutoffs are going to come into picture now. Okay, Lakshit has a question. So, what would be the best time to appear for the exam if you want to take admission next year? Okay, generally I keep a slide on that as well, but again, I've not kept it today. But just to give you an idea, Lakshit, if you are targeting Indian B schools, you should complete your prep. Try to take the GMAT by June end if possible. Again, if you can stretch it till July mid also, but June end is the ideal if you want to apply in round one for Indian B schools. But if you want to apply to European or American B schools or Canadian B schools, you can push the GMAT by one more month. Like you can take it in July end also, or worst case scenario August mid. But these are the last, like basically the last timelines that you should aim for if you're looking at round one. Okay, I'm just talking about round one applications. If you are looking at round two, then you can give the GMAT by another. You can extend the GMAT by another 3 months or so. So it also depends on where you are, Lakshit, in your preparation right now. Obviously, if you give me more inputs, more data, I can help you understand that better. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Lakshit. Okay, so again, I don't see any other question. So either I was really good in explaining everything to you so that you don't have any doubts, or I was really bad that you don't want to ask me questions. And I hope it is the former, and I'm very confident that it is the former as well. So all the best, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to write to us. You have all the details that you need, and we'll love to help you out with your GMAT prep and MB applications as well. So all the best, and it is Piyush Beriwala signing off for the day. And see you guys on episode 2 and episode 3 of the series as well very, very soon. All the best, guys.